Welcome to this session introducing the formal application phase for certification under Regulation EU 2017/745. This second module is part of a series of videos designed to give you an overview of the certification process under the European Medical Device Regulation. This series is designed to help you gain a better understanding of the regulatory requirements relating to the certification process, provide you with an overview of the certification process, enabling you to identify the various key stages, align your certification projects and go-to-market strategy with the requirements of the regulations and GMED certification process, and finally, enable you to prepare the submission of your certification projects in the best possible conditions. Understanding and visibility of all stages of the certification process are essential to the success of the certification projects. That's why the GMED team encourages you to take these modules before submitting a project or during your certification process. The certification process under Regulation EU 2017/745 comprises 12 steps divided into 5 different phases. The first step involves contacting the notified body, issuing a quotation, and then receiving the order from the manufacturer. Next comes the signing of the certification contract, which takes place before or at the same time as receipt of the manufacturer's formal application for certification. Following receipt of the manufacturer's formal application for certification, the notified body examines the application and either accepts or rejects it. Once the formal application for certification has been accepted, conformity assessment activities can begin. This is followed by the final examination and the certification decision. When certification under Regulation EU 2017/745 is granted, post-certification monitoring and control activities begin and continue until certification is renewed. In this module, we will review the second phase of the certification process, called the formal application for certification phase, which covers the stages of signing the certification contract for CE marking, receipt of the formal application, examination of the formal application by GMED, and acceptance or rejection of the manufacturer's formal application. The formal application phase is a crucial and decisive stage in the certification process. This phase allows the notified body to closely examine the information provided by the manufacturer and to verify certain parameters and aspects that are essential for the proper conduct of the conformity assessment activities to be performed. At the end of the formal application phase, the notified body must decide whether to accept the formal application for certification and thus continue the certification process, or to reject the formal application for certification and thus stop the certification process under the regulation in Phase 2. The formal certification application phase begins as soon as GMED receives the manufacturer's order, i.e. by signing the quotation for the conformity assessment services to be carried out. After receiving the order, the GMED teams draw up and make available to the manufacturer the formal certification application form and the certification contract for CE marking under Regulation EU 2017/745. The manufacturer then fills in the formal certification application form and returns the completed and signed form, together with all the documents requested, to GMED to submit the formal certification application. On receipt of the application form, GMED teams examine the manufacturer's formal application for certification and decide whether to accept or reject it. Before we can confirm acceptance of the formal application for certification, the manufacturer must sign the certification contract for CE marking under the regulations made available by GMED. The main objective of the examination of the formal application for certification is therefore to decide whether or not to accept the formal application for certification under the European Medical Devices Regulation. To achieve this goal, the manufacturer must submit a formal application for certification, which includes a formal request for certification form, completed and signed, all of the documents requested and expected by GMED, including the complete technical documentation for each device for which the technical documentation assessment service is to be carried out, with a view of issuing a certificate, a preliminary review medical device technical documentation form, completed and signed for each technical documentation submitted, certification contract for CE marking under Regulation EU 2017/745 signed. The notified body must then examine the formal application for certification and, more specifically, the formal certification application file in order to ensure that the formal application for certification is complete, i.e. that all the documents requested and expected by GMED have been sent by the manufacturer and are included in the manufacturer's formal application for certification. The purpose of this verification is twofold. Firstly, it is to confirm that all the documents and information required by the regulation at this stage of the certification process have been supplied by the manufacturer, and therefore that the content of the manufacturer's formal application for certification complies with the requirements of the regulation. And secondly, to ensure that GMED has at its disposal all of the documents and data required to carry out conformity assessment activities under the regulation in the best possible conditions, such as complete technical documentation and the company's quality manual. Please note that during this verification, GMED does not assess the conformity of documents and information transmitted by the manufacturer to regulatory requirements. Compliance with regulatory requirements is assessed as part of the appropriate conformity assessment activities, mainly the assessment of technical documentation and the audit of the quality management system. As part of the examination of the formal application for certification, GMED's intervention is limited to verifying the completeness of the formal application for certification and certain parameters and aspects that have a direct impact on the certification process, such as a check that the products covered by the application are medical devices and that their classification is appropriate. Confirm that the conformity assessment procedures adopted by the manufacturer are applicable to the products covered by the application. And finally, confirm the notified body's ability to assess the manufacturer's application based on the scope of its designation and ensure the existence of sufficient and appropriate resources. Upon completion of the formal application review, if the application review is satisfactory, the manufacturer's formal application for certification is accepted and conformity assessment activities can be performed, mainly assessment of technical documentation followed by an audit of the quality management system. However, if GMED's examination of the application is unsatisfactory, GMED may request additional information from the manufacturer. Please note that in this case, only one request for supplements is sent to the manufacturer. Following this request, if the examination of additional elements transmitted by the manufacturer is satisfactory, the manufacturer's formal application for certification is accepted and conformity assessment activities can be initiated. However, if the examination of the additional elements transmitted by the manufacturer is unsatisfactory, the manufacturer's formal application is rejected. In this case, the certification process stops at the formal application stage. Please note that rejection of a formal application for certification is systematically notified in EUDAMED by the notified body. In this module, we will review the various documents that make up the formal certification application file, which the manufacturer must send to GMED in order to submit a formal application for certification under the regulation. The first document that forms an integral part of the formal certification application file is the formal certification application form. The formal certification application form is made available to the manufacturer once GMED has received the manufacturer's order, i.e. once the manufacturer signed the quotation for the conformity assessment activities to be carried out with a view to certification. This form includes all the information previously submitted by the manufacturer in his SIF and analysed by GMED as part of the pre-application phase. The content of the formal certification application form is adapted and specifically created regarding the manufacturer's formal certification application project defined in his SIF and analysed by GMED. It's a completely personalised form, tailor-made for the manufacturer for whom it's intended. The formal application for certification form enables the manufacturer to identify the devices for which the technical documentation to be submitted to GMED as part of the formal application for certification with a view to their evaluation during the technical documentation assessment activities. As a reminder, complete technical documentation must be submitted for every Class 3 and Class 2B implantable device, excluding sutures, staples, dental fillings, orthodontic appliances, dental crowns, screws, wedges, plates, guides, pins, clips and connecting devices, and for each Class 2A and Class 2B non-implantable or Class 2B implantable device selected by the notified body as part of the sampling plan drawn up before the certificate is issued. To find out about the device sampling rules applied by notified bodies prior to certificate issuance, we invite you to view GMED's session presenting the pre-application phase of the certification process under Regulation EU 2017/745. Finally, this form enables the manufacturer to provide GMED with all the documents expected and requested as part of the formal application for certification under the regulations. This form includes one or more checklists that allows the manufacturer to identify the documents to be sent to GMED, indicate the references of the documents sent, and to ensure that all the documents expected by GMED and required by Regulation EU 2017/745 as part of the formal application for certification are present in the formal application for certification file. Please note that the content of the checklists included in the formal certification application form sent to the manufacturer is fully adapted and specifically established according to the scope of the manufacturer's formal certification application. Consequently, the content of the formal certification application form will depend on the scope of the manufacturer's formal certification application. This form is therefore manufacturer dependent. However, to enable manufacturers to prepare their formal application for certification under the best possible conditions and as quickly as possible, GMED makes available on its website the GMED Guide, Application for Certification with a view to CE mark under Regulation EU 2017/745. This guide specifies the conformity assessment procedure may be chosen by the manufacturer depending on the class of device, and indicates the documents and information to be transmitted to GMED depending on the conformity assessment procedure chosen and the class of the device. This guide will help you to prepare your formal certification application in advance so that you are ready to submit your formal certification application as soon as GMED provides you with your formal certification application form. Let's move on to the preliminary review form, medical device technical documentation. This form is an integral part of the formal application for certification and must be completed for each piece of technical documentation to be submitted. The form is sent directly to the manufacturer by the certification project manager when the formal certification application form is made available. The preliminary technical documentation review form has two main functions. Firstly, it ensures that the technical documentation is complete for the manufacturer before it is sent, and for GMED when checking that the application is complete. This form is also a guidance document for product reviewers who will be responsible for evaluating the device's technical documentation. Using this document, the evaluation team can easily find their way around the technical documentation and evaluate it in the best possible conditions. It is therefore essential that this form is completed accurately and rigorously by the manufacturer. The completeness of this document has a direct impact on the assessment of technical documentation and therefore on conformity assessment activities. The preliminary technical documentation review form consists of different sections. The first section, entitled General Assessment Report, and Section 2, entitled Clinical Evaluation Report, are two mandatory sections to be completed systematically, whatever the class and type of device covered by the technical documentation. Sections 3 to 9 correspond to specific sections to be completed according to the specific characteristics of the devices covered by the technical documentation. Completing the preliminary review of technical documentation form has a direct impact on the examination of your formal application for certification, as well as on the assessment of the technical documentation. The form must be completed with precision and rigour. We remind you that a preliminary review form is expected for each technical documentation to be submitted. The third component of the formal certification application file is the certification contract for CE marking under the regulation. This certification contract is a so-called framework contract, i.e. it sets out the general conditions of the contractual relationship between the manufacturer and GMED with the view of obtaining CE marking for the manufacturer. It consists of a contract body which specifies the obligations of each of the parties, i.e. GMED and the manufacturer, and several appendices with specific obligations for each of the parties which apply depending on the conformity assessment procedure chosen by the manufacturer and the scope of his certification application project. It is made available to the manufacturer for signature once the quotations have been signed by the manufacturer. This contract is drawn up by GMED based on information communicated by the manufacturer in its CIF and verified by GMED. It is totally independent of any certification contracts for CE marking under the directives that may have previously been signed with GMED. The signature of this contract is essential to enable GMED to accept the manufacturer's formal application for certification and therefore to proceed with the certification process. To help manufacturers design and ensure the completeness of their technical documentation, GMED has developed several documents. In particular, you'll find the technical memo, technical documentation, information to be provided for assessment. We strongly advise you to take note of this technical memo when drafting your technical documentation or when submitting your formal application for certification. This technical memo has two objectives. Firstly, to clarify the content of technical documentation, and secondly, to provide recommendations on the documentation format expected by GMED. You'll also find specific technical memos and guides. These documents provide invaluable information on what to include in the technical documentation of devices with specific characteristics, or for which specific technologies or processes are used. The technical memo, technical documentation, information to be provided for assessment, together with all of the technical memos and specific guides, are tools that complement the regulations and enable technical documentation to be designed in terms of content and format, which complies with the requirements of the regulation EU 2017/745 and is adapted to the GMED certification process. These documents are drawn up by GMED experts and are made available to manufacturers by their CPM. Use of and access of the technical memos are reserved for GMED customers. We are now coming to the end of this second presentation module dedicated to the formal certification application phase. Important information to remember in connection with this second decisive step in the certification process under Regulation EU 2017/745 is as follows. From the second stage of the certification process under the regulation, the manufacturer must provide several documents to the notified body, including the complete technical documentation. In order to complete this phase of the process in the best conditions and as quickly as possible, we recommend that manufacturers familiarise themselves with and identify the documents to be submitted as part of the formal application for certification. As a reminder, the GMED Guide, Application for Certification with a View to CE marking under Regulation EU 2017/745, specifies all the documents to be provided. During the examination of the manufacturer's formal application for certification, the notified body does not assess the compliance of the transmitted documents with the regulations. Conformity assessment of the transmitted documents will be carried out as part of the conformity assessment activities after acceptance of the formal application for certification. The formal application phase is crucial to the certification process, as the notified body must decide whether or not to accept the manufacturer's formal application. This concludes the second module in the MDR certification process. I hope it will give you a better understanding of the issues and requirements involved in the essential step of submitting the formal application for certification to GMED. Please contact our sales team or your certification project manager for further information or to submit your application. As indicated in the introduction, this module is part of a series of several videos. You will be informed of their availability as they become available. In particular, you'll be able to find important information on the following topics: the pre-application phase, the formal application phase for certification, the conformity assessment phase, the decision phase, and the post-certification monitoring and control phase. Thank you for your attention. See you soon.